Hey Sandra, how are you?
Good. I'm good. We're live on my LinkedIn and YouTube, and this is
Yay! Hi everyone.
this is a not a repeat. It's our second conversation
Our
that we're gonna
second
have.
one. Yes, time
The
flies.
first one did so well. You got such a good response, and you had people messaging, not just me, they message you directly. So that's how I know when people really like someone, they'll just message the other person instead of
Oh,
me.
you're a really good facilitator. I mean, the last one we did was on unshakable confidence. So, yeah, excited
Yeah.
to be on here again. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, yes. And to give people a little bit of introduction, Bonnie is a woman in STEM. She's a PhD, very accomplished. She's also an international guest. She's in the UK. And I'm always so glad that you're so accommodating because it's bedtime over there where you're at.
No, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure for sure.
Yeah. So this time we're going to talk about some different topics. And you've had like a ton of life changes and exciting things that I do want to dig into. And since you've career pivoted so much, or whatever you want to call it, like life pivoted, we're going to talk a lot about that because I think that's one thing a lot of people are scared to do sometimes in life. How do they decide? How do they know what they want to do? All their fears associated with that. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, sure. So I'm Bonnie. My background is in physics. So for my PhD, I did theoretical physics, a PhD on the electronic properties of graphene and other 2D materials. And then after that, I worked in events, marketing, and communications. And then I moved into a
Yeah.
corporate consulting role. And now I'm working in a deep tech company. So I've moved around quite a lot in different domains and different types of jobs as well.
Yeah, I can't even explain all that. So I don't even know what a lot of that even means. But that's what's so interesting about you because if you think about it, sometimes people's fear is they've invested so much in one area. Like you did a lot of schooling, right, to get to
Yes.
even PhD level. And there's this fear of like throwing it away or why would they change to anything else? So, yeah, if you want to talk through some of that, what kind of inspired you to change? Like marketing is so radically different, right? It's not something people with a very scientific technical background would even think about or do.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the opportunities and roles I've had have really come from the people in my network. So, from my PhD, I
Mm.
moved into a communications and marketing role in events, but the event itself was bringing together scientists, innovators, people from startups,
Oh.
governments. So, while I wasn't doing science, I was connecting with people in the ecosystem who were scientists as well. And I think, at least from my PhD, what I learned the most was less about the domain knowledge. And of course, I did learn a lot of specific knowledge and content in those areas. But I think that wasn't really the key skill. And I
Oh.
always found during my PhD that I really liked organizing events and I really liked connecting with people. So
Mm.
it was a natural move, and because I was asked to join the role,
Oh my gosh. Oh, let me see if she comes back. I don't know what happened.
I am back.
I was like, I'm gonna wait a little bit. She was talking mid sentence. Hopefully, she comes back. Okay.
Yeah. So
Hey,
uh,
but we're really live, so that proves that we truly are live.
I think I got to the bit where I was like, I always really liked organizing events and networking with other people in the scientific community. So I felt that it was quite a natural move. And then also,
Mm.
I was hired by my CEO at the time, who also had a PhD in physics. So we were
Oh.
doing something creative, but within the scientific community.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you had these opportunities presented to you rather than you necessarily pursuing all of them, right?
Yes, I would say that's right. Yes. For my last three roles, they all came from people in my network who
Wow.
identified that I may be suited for those things. And I've always been open-minded. So, for example, for my corporate role, I had a friend who referred me in, and it was a completely different industry. It was the construction industry. I was working in infrastructure specifically, and it all came down to communication. And nearly in every single role, that was my strongest skill set that I was using, whether it was communicating with decision makers, communicating scientific concepts to different audiences. So I think that's the thing that is the golden thread between all those roles that all seem seemingly different.
That's interesting because now you can probably kind of zoom out and they're not also, disconnected. You see the common thread, and not everybody that's has a background in STEM that's technical can speak very well. So that is kind of a unique skill that you've honed over the years, right?
Yes, I think so. I think growing up, I really loved performing. So I took dance classes, I was in orchestra and choir. So I really like presenting. And then by the time I was doing my PhD, I had to do a mandatory business course. And within that course, we had to do a lot of presenting and pitching. And that's when I found that I really like doing that. So I really like doing public speaking, facilitating, getting on stages. And
Mm.
then that's kind of where I honed.
Yeah, and oh yeah, along those lines, not too long ago, you were on a big stage. Tell
Yes,
us about that. Yeah.
it was a really exciting experience. So in November at the end of last year, I went to Abu Dhabi and I was the MC for the keynote stage. And then I also went to a recording studio for the first time to record all the Voice of God announcements. And that opportunity came around from not my last boss, but my last boss. And it really showed that even though after you've left a job for a couple of years, you can maintain those relationships. And when there are those opportunities that are right for you, the people will come and ask you and join them again. So it was a really great experience to
Yeah.
see how the event had grown since we worked on it a few years ago.
Oh, the pictures, they looked amazing of that stage and all that
It
in
was
the
very
event.
creative. And I think that's what I missed that I didn't have in my scientific career, that I wanted more of that creativity and more of the arts as well.
So you mentioned that was a former boss reaching out to you. How did you kind of maintain those relationships where somebody would think of you from, I don't know how long it's been since you've worked for him, but how do you keep in contact with those people and so they think of you later?
My former boss was a woman, um,
Oh, okay.
and
That's unique.
I think for me, I did use LinkedIn quite a lot, always showing that I'm still interested and that I do like public speaking, I do like getting on stages
Yeah.
and sharing my passion in general. And I think that is the most important because even now, say if I want someone to help me with something, I always just think of specific people because they're top of mind, because I see them so often sharing their gifts, sharing their passions online. And I think that's what makes the difference.
Oh, wow. So just the power of you keeping top of mind through your LinkedIn post, and then that person thought of you when an opportunity came up.
Yeah,
Um,
I believe that's true. My current role, I got through LinkedIn as well. It was somewhat, my current CEO is someone
uh-huh.
who I met over 2 years ago. And when the right thing came up, he reached out to me. So I do believe that even though you may not be in contact with people all the time and talking to them, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they don't notice you or
Yeah.
that they're reading what you're saying. And when there is something relevant, they'll reach out to you.
Oh, you're so right. I was reading this book over the weekend. It was talking about instead of going out and applying for jobs, when you're doing more like what you're talking about, the opportunities and offers come to you.
Yeah,
You're not trying to
some people
fill
say
these
the law of
positions out
attraction.
there. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's so fortunate because it's just, it shows you the power of, well, I think a lot of people use LinkedIn as more like, I need a job, and it's very transactional, right? Because they're only using it when they absolutely need something. but you're cultivating, a presence on there. You're talking about what you're passionate about. You're talking about your skills. How long have you been active on LinkedIn?
I'd say in the last 6 months or even more, I've been particularly active.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, maybe I'd occasionally be active when I had something new to announce or I was attending an event, but it wasn't really consistent. But I think I've been more consistent in the last 6 months or so.
Wow. See, that's not that long at all for that to really show that it pays off and it keeps you top of mind for people because just think about it, 6 months of consistent effort, right?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely acknowledge that I'm in a fortunate position to have people in my network who had noticed that there were roles for
Mhm.
me. In August last year, I started posting daily videos. And after day 5, I remember thinking, I don't know if I want to carry on with this. And then in that same week, my current CEO messaged me on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know whether it was a coincidence or something like this, but I know that I definitely popped up on his feed. So then I
Mhm.
think, okay, maybe that had something, whether consciously or subconsciously, something to do with him reaching out to me. And then that progressed into the new role that I'm in today. So
Oh, I did not know that story. I did not know that.
yeah, so it was like on the day I was thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm going to carry on. And then, yeah, and then it was like something appeared that I wasn't specifically looking for, but it
Yeah.
was the right fit. So,
Oh, but that's so interesting because it's always when you think of giving up, and then it's that person that messages you that kind of inspires you to go on. And you don't know. I mean, it could have been you just popped into his brain, but I also think that video just creates that connection with people, right?
yeah, for sure. And occasionally people message me and say, I really like your videos, but they're people who haven't commented or liked anything.
Hmm.
So your audience might be people you don't know, or you might inspire people that haven't reached out yet. So I try to keep consistent because maybe I'm helping at least one other person.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And how long was your streak that you went? Because you went a long time.
It was something like 164 days or something like this until last week, actually, where I decided that I wanted to mix up my content and not only do videos, to
Yeah.
also do other posts and such like as well. Because I think LinkedIn as a platform, it is also very text-based, or a lot of people use it at work and maybe their sound's not on, people aren't necessarily watching
Yes.
full videos. And then also I think people consume content differently as well, or it can keep it interesting to have different formats. Because when
Yeah.
you see the same thing every day, it might look like the same video. Uh,
Right, because now they want to
yeah.
tune in and see what else you have to say or what you're gonna. I think it's good to have mix it up.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll go back to more videos, but yeah, at the moment, I'm trying to still post consistently, but definitely keeping in mind that LinkedIn is still a social media and I don't want to, that shouldn't be the only thing I'm thinking about, for sure.
Right, right. You don't have to become all too consuming. It is nice to take a little bit of a break sometimes because it can get very doom scrolly and getting fixated on the numbers and impressions and likes and all that. And it's not always all about that all the time. And it's easy to get fixated on, I guess, like the vanity metrics, right?
Yes. At first, the first 90 days, I really enjoyed looking at them, looking at the
Yeah.
impressions chart. And then afterwards, it's like, actually, this, whether it's high or not, it shouldn't really affect my mood that much.
I know, but you know what? I think just being like data oriented analytical people, I think that's the problem with it because we want to look at the metrics and we want to look at the analytics, and I can get really fixated on it. And sometimes I'm like, no, I just shouldn't. I should just do it because I like it. But
Yeah, it's always like, oh, I wonder why this one went viral and this one didn't. And some videos I did in a minute and they went viral. Others I thought a lot about and they didn't do as well. And sometimes it's like, you I don't even know why or what the difference was.
Yeah, you can't overthink it sometimes. And yet we want to like have this scientific reason why this certain one did well. And I have no idea sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, have you ever felt fear around making some of these decisions when you're pivoting, or did you ever get maybe just poor feedback from family or friends, or like, what are you doing? Or
Good question. I think one of my biggest concerns before was the thought of if I moved lots of different roles, that my salary would stay stagnant because
oh,
I thought that, oh, maybe every time I changed industry or moved into a different role, I would have to start completely all over again. And
right.
I remember someone saying to me, this was shortly after I finished my PhD, say the advice was, don't think that you're just a student. And maybe because during my PhD, I really had that student mindset. So I was going into the workplace
Mm,
with that mindset as well, that I'm just a student, respect the hierarchy of, you've got your directors, you've got your senior managers,
yeah.
and I'm basically starting again. But I found that that hasn't necessarily been the case. And even times when I did choose to take a pay cut, it was like afterwards, it just multiplied back so much more because I got the skills that I needed to make a big jump for my next role.
Yes.
So it's obviously easier to say than it is to do, because ultimately everyone needs a baseline of what money they need to live, but
Yeah.
especially if you want to, do something you like or learn new skills, I think it's okay to take a pay cut within reason. So I think that
Yeah.
was the thing that I was most concerned about. But actually, after a long time, I don't think it's made a difference. If anything, I've actually been able to go to a higher salary than I think I would have had I taken other paths.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, because that probably is one huge limiting belief for people. And I think, like you're saying, it's sometimes not focusing on the short term and looking at the long term, the bigger picture, right? And you might take a tiny little step back, but to go even further in the future. And if people could not just focus on, oh, yeah, I might have a, I don't know, slightly lower title or slightly lower pay for a bit, but you're really building into yourself. And once you are building into Bonnie and more skills, that makes you so much more attractive everywhere else, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes people maybe are focusing on those incremental jumps, and you can take a slightly lower jump and then take a much bigger jump after. And then for me,
Yeah.
I felt that it was needed as well. So maybe in my early 20s, I was driving really hard at my career, and it's not a sustainable pace, right? To go
Mm.
like 100% all the time. And actually sometimes you do need to take a step back and do roles where you're still learning, but you're not going so aggressively. So that's what I found.
Yeah.
So now that when I was in my corporate role, the things that I was learning was less of the technical skills. So I still learned technical skills,
Hmm.
but it was all about, okay, how do I manage stakeholders? How do meetings happen? How do big organizations run? And I think that is the knowledge that is really helping me now that I'm in a growing deep tech startup.
Yeah. So it's more about maybe seeking more growth and learning opportunities than anything else, right? Instead of the salary. And it's funny you talked about the nonlinear growth, because it's just when you think about entrepreneurship, that's what it could be like exponential, right? But you sometimes take a step back and then you go somewhere to learn more. But the traditional, just career ladder is incremental steps up and up, right?
Yeah,
And
for
usually you're getting
sure.
more and more work
I
along the
mean,
way
for
also.
me, I think the 2 years in corporate was that time to sort of like take a step back and still learn, but also use that time to think about what I wanted to do. And I think there was so much value in going from a university to working in a small team for events
Hmm.
and then moving to a big organization and just seeing that perspective of, okay, this is how different workplaces are running, and then making my own decision on what I want to do and what I don't want to do, or where I want to work. So yeah, I think it's been really valuable experience.
So, like, what advice would you give to someone maybe younger? Well, not necessarily, it's not that much younger, but like in their 20s, maybe they're exploring and debating different things and worried about the risk, or, same thing like you're saying, maybe salary stagnation or what other people are going to think. What advice would you give them?
Don't try to search for the perfect thing straight away, because maybe some people have this expectation that whatever choice they make, it has to be permanent for
Oh,
all however many years. The thing
yeah.
is, there's this, I can't remember where I read it, but most decisions are reversible, or they won't permanently damage your career. Like whatever you choose something for a reason, but you're not going to find something that's 100% perfect. So you have to like pick your battles as well.
Ooh.
Like choose what is important to you. Um, but also sometimes there are some compromises. I think especially at the start of your career, because actually everything you want, it's just an assumption. Maybe people want, yeah, I want a financial job in the city, and then they later find out that they hate being in the city. So sometimes you
Oh,
just don't know. I would
I love
take other
that.
people's experience with the grain of salt as well. At some point, I
Yeah.
really wanted to climb the corporate ladder because other people were wanting that. So I believed that I also wanted that. And then you're actually doing it and you're like, oh, actually, this is not what I want personally, though I understand what other people want it. So
Oh.
yeah, I'd say be clear on, you're not going to know what you want exactly. And then, yeah, don't get swayed by other people. Just because other people want something doesn't mean you have to follow that path as well.
Yeah, I love that. Everything you want is an assumption. And you're still figuring yourself out so much in your 20s, right? And how would you know? You're absolutely right, because the same how people say they have their dream house or they met their dream person. I don't know. I don't know if you can select that so early on, or it's going to be so perfect. And it makes sense. We say that about like houses and people. The same thing goes for jobs, and people really strive for, they want the perfect job. But you're right. I mean, who says you're not an indentured slave? You don't have to work somewhere the rest of your life or pick any career for forever, or industry or anything. So why not try some different things out? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, have fun with it. But also, I think the other piece of advice is to be grateful no matter what situation and where you're working right now, or what your career
Mm.
looks like, because maybe at some point in time, everything you have now is what you wanted previously. So I always remind myself of that, be grateful. Nothing is perfect. And I remember I used to talk to my colleagues and they're like, oh no, nobody likes their job. Or as it in a way of like, no one is 100% happy with their job. Actually, apparently there was
Oh.
a survey that was done and it was like, oh, people are like less than 20% happy
Yeah,
with
we
their
have
job.
we have stats
You
like that
can't.
here in the US. Like
Yeah. So,
over 70% are disengaged at work or something like that. Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that you don't like your job, but don't expect every moment you're going to like, everyone has to do emails and or the majority of people are going to have to do some admin at some point, and this comes with even the best of roles.
Yeah. So what's your favorite part of working, or what you do now? Or maybe what is like your dream ideal role?
Oh, good question. Currently, I think what I'm really enjoying is the ability to influence different areas of the business. And I can see how my previous work experience is helping.
Hmm.
And I think that's really great because during my time in corporate, sometimes it's not obvious when you're learning things. It's sort of just like, you feel like, at least I felt like I was in this big machine. It's like, what am I
Yeah.
learning? But then now that I'm in a company with fewer people, I can say, oh, yes, there was this situation at my old job, or yeah, for these big organizations, this is how they would do it. And then I'm like, oh, actually, I've learned more than I thought I have. And I think that
Yes.
was new for me, because for me, learning, at least growing up, was always about like certificates or like technical challenges where it was obvious to me that I was learning. But the way that you navigate disagreements in a meeting, you can't really like put a score on that. It's just
No, you
suddenly,
can't. Yeah, now you have more wisdom and
yes,
experience, right?
it's like, oh, I'm confidently explaining my idea in this meeting. And it's like, I feel that
Yeah.
change in myself.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't see it until you get into a different environment and now you're applying it and now you realize like, oh, that other place was teaching me things I just didn't realize.
Yes, it's like I now understand why Gantt charts and milestones are so important. Or like,
Yeah.
and it's like, yes, it was valuable experience too. That's why I think people should be grateful no matter where they are, even though it's not obvious maybe at the time why you should be grateful.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll tell people that, well, they'll have this difficult coworker. They're like, oh, work would be so much better if just so and so weren't there. It's like, well, so and so is probably there to teach you something because there's going to be a so and so in the next job.
Yeah. No, I love that. And actually, even in all these workplaces I've worked in, there are always similar challenges. They're just in different
Yes.
contexts.
Yeah, there's like the know-it-all, and there's there's so many
can't run
different
away.
like archetypes and
Yeah.
personalities, and yeah.
Because you're working with people, so it's a valuable skill to, want to choose to kind of overcome people. I think that's the most interesting thing about careers. You're working with people no matter what you're doing. I really like kind of working on my own, on my laptop. Actually, everything, you're working with people. You're working online with people all the time. So I think people skills are one of the most important for career growth.
Oh, wow. Wow. And yeah, so what type of things are you talking about now on LinkedIn? Because I know maybe you're shifting some of the things you talk about, confidence and speaking, and what other type of topics are you talking about?
Yes, so at the moment, I'm talking a lot about helping introverts or people who are
Oh,
more
right,
shy
right, right.
to advance in their careers. So this might be about advocating for yourself. I think one of the best pieces of advice I've had, I got over 2 years ago. So this was before I started my corporate role. I was speaking to an executive coach who I connected with on LinkedIn, and she said to me to be visible, that to succeed in the workplace, you need to be visible. So to always speak in every meeting, you can either give a suggestion, comment on what someone has said, ask a question. And I remember doing exactly that. And I think that really helped me gain influence and also become more confident in the workplace. So what I've learned in the last few years, I want to share that on LinkedIn at the moment, which is what I've been doing.
That is really good advice I've never heard. So she's just saying, just say something, not necessarily saying like you have to argue with people or start a debate, just
it could
have a
be
contribution.
anything. Have a contribution. Yeah, you could be complimenting someone, you could be giving an idea, a suggestion, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a very significant where you're speaking a long time in a meeting. And I remember doing that on the first day of my job, at my corporate job, and immediately people noticed and were like, oh, you were asking a question in that meeting. And I think that's when I was like, oh wow, like all I did was ask a question, and that raised my visibility so quickly. So yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. And that's a piece of advice I give to some of the people I manage at work as well. I'm like, you need to be visible, because even though I know you're working really hard and doing the things, maybe others don't. And I think I've learned a lot about like image management at work. And that's kind of like been an interesting lesson as well.
Oh, tell me some of your thoughts about that, because I think about that too, especially with my work environment now where it's work from home. So it's a different level of managing your perception, because how do you manage that when we're not on camera, just to give you context. We're just voices talking, and we're also a very large team, and it's even harder in some ways to like stand out, like you're talking about, like to make significant contributions in meetings and all that.
Yeah, I found that I've worked remotely quite a lot as well in the past few years, and I've found that those who are text communicative on Teams, they
Okay.
seem to always be people who are top of mind, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing more. But I think it's because when people are like, oh, hey, they just like they're sharing something, or hey, has anyone got any comments on this? Or hey, I just saw this. And then suddenly it's like, oh, this person is like a coordinator or someone who like facilitates things happening over Teams chat, like, oh, so and so's they're always giving updates. So I found that, yeah, being text communicative is helpful and definitely brings visibility because it's kind of hard to ignore the same names popping up on chat.
Yeah, yeah. No, you made a really, really good point, because there are some people that are very good at that. And there are other people who are like, why do they keep messaging all the time? Or do they have to update us all the time? But you're right. That's their way. They're trying to keep top of mind. They can't necessarily always do it in a meeting. But that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and I found some of the most influential people, they don't necessarily say a lot during the meeting, but
Hmm.
they are always the person to summarize what is happening at the end of a meeting. And then
Oh.
suddenly that person that I found becomes influential because the person is like, okay, so these are key takeaways from the meeting. These are so and so's actions. This is what, and then they're like controlling the end of the meeting. And
Oh,
I
that's
found
really
that's
good.
been quite interesting as well. I've seen a few people do that.
Oh, kind of like they can synthesize the whole meeting and for everybody.
Yes,
Interesting.
because
I've
then you can
never
be
even
like,
thought
hey,
of that.
what happened? They're always that go-to person of, hey, can you just tell me what happened? And they can just tell you
Yeah,
concisely.
because there's all these parts where you're tuning out, or you're like you're not paying attention, and it's like that person like, just give me the rundown. And it is brilliant, the people that can do that really well. Because I noticed that I actually do it for like my financial coaching clients. I synthesize the whole meeting for them, and I used to think they were kind of useless summaries. I thought it was more for me. Um, but I enjoy doing them. My clients like them, and it's just, yeah, it's just this is everything that was kind of said and conveyed, and it's out there. And I email them after, and it's good for me too, because it forces me to think back of everything I said, right? And be more coherent with my thoughts and put it down on paper. So yeah, there is a skill to that, because I noticed there are other people. It's the same thing like you're saying. I'll say like, "Oh, I missed a little part of the meeting," and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Oh, you weren't paying attention. Like, what happened?" They're not good at recapping the meeting at all, or telling you anything significant from it. Or I'll talk with like three different coworkers maybe after a meeting, and they all have a different perception of what happened. And it was only like what was most important to them, or like maybe they got bored, or someone will say it was totally fine, and then from another person that oh no, it went this way, and it's like, what really happened?
Are you using AI note takers? Because some of them are really good at doing like sentiment analysis and explaining like the summary, but also like how many questions were asked.
See, I'm so skeptical of those, and I tried it because I've seen people reviewing them now, and I think they've maybe gotten better, but I don't know. I'm wary of those. What do you
Oh,
think about it?
no, I love them. I use them in my work, and particularly when you download the transcript. We have an enterprise version of ChatGPT, so I download the
Oh.
transcript and then I can upload it to ChatGPT and then also query it. So I can ask, can you tell me all the actions that different people need to do in the meeting? And then it's been pretty good at picking out technical details as well. So
Oh,
in
really?
my line of work, there's a lot of calls where we're talking about different things on different, like this micrometers, this material, and this, and it picks it up quite well. And I think the best part about it is that you can kind of just share the transcript and summary with coworkers who were not in that meeting, but didn't have to be in the meeting. But if they need to go and check a technical detail to follow up on, they can see exactly what it is.
So you have access to all the high tech stuff, because I work for a government contractor. We don't. If we did, like you were saying, I think people would love that, because then they don't have to be in the whole meeting, or they'd have it summarized, or the key points. And
that
would be dangerous.
Clarifications, because especially when you're taking so many partner calls or customer calls, it's like, what was that specific, this tiny detail that someone said, and then you can go and find it. So that's been quite helpful.
Yeah. Are you on camera for a lot of like your customer meetings? Because how do you find interacting on camera? Because you already do a lot of videos, so like maybe you have some tips for that.
Yeah, good question. So even in my last role and this role, we're all like pretty much the whole company's cameras on. So we've been pretty used to it. I think one of the tips I saw is, if I'm presenting on camera, like I'm presenting a deck or something, I always like look at the screen, like look at the camera, which is what I'm doing now, because I find that might be more engaging for the other person. And I try and like do a balance of looking at
I'm trying to work on improving that too. But then also there's just parts when, what if I don't know, you feel a little bored or something, and how do you keep that like or you like have to look like you're engaged the whole time if you're on camera, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to give you the tips. Yeah, I mean, I do some nodding, and for sure I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
So I mean, that's a whole another level, because I don't have to quite deal with that. But the camera etiquette is different with, and how you appear on screen, and people do read a lot into it. So,
I think so. I think I've been working somewhat remotely since COVID, so it's sort of
you've had some time to get used to
it now. But sometimes there are meetings where we have cameras off, and like I go for a walk, or I'm standing or something like this, because otherwise I find that I'm sitting way too much because of meetings.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's the tough part about working from home. You feel so sedentary. It's easy to not get out of your chair for hours.
Until you're back.
Yeah. So what do you think might be next for you? Do you think you might pivot or change again, or I don't know, or what are you going to do with your LinkedIn and all the stuff you're talking about online?
Good question. I'd like to continue with LinkedIn. I think it's good practice, at least for myself, to share things in a concise way. And if I've learned something, sometimes I just really want to like share it with someone, or like say, it's like messaging a friend where it's like, hey, I just read this book and this is really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of just like chatting with people on video, and
and LinkedIn makes like you the biggest scale of that. Like when you just find something really interesting and you want to share it with other people. I'd really like to continue that. And then I think by virtue of sharing content, I'm always trying to learn something interesting as well, and keep my mind fresh. And then also it forces me to think about what I've learned in my life, like if I've had any experiences or something I want to share that could be helpful for others.
No, it's true. It's funny because people will say, well, Sandra, how do you have so much ideas and things to write and talk about? Because I ingest so many things and I think about a lot of things, you know what I'm saying? So it's just listening to podcasts and reading books and having thoughts about, money or life or other things. So it doesn't feel that hard to come up with things because I don't have to necessarily go research all of them. You see what I'm saying? I'm just learning and figuring out more of who I am and what I want to say and what I'm thinking about. And then I just share that instead of just like, I have to chat GPT, like, car leases or something. I'm like, no, I'm writing more about like what's on my mind and what I'm thinking about. So I always think as you're evolving as a human, right, then your content kind of evolves, right? It's not necessarily static. People change and evolve, and things they're interested in that they want to talk about.
Yeah, and interests change and progress. And a good piece of advice I've heard was, so, there's a lot of people are sharing similar content, but they're doing it in different ways. And it makes sense because I think as humans, we connect with things in similar ways, or we have similar thoughts about certain topics. And I remember my cousin saying, because this was years ago, he was like, oh, why don't you, I used to do physics tutoring for students. He was like, oh, what? I was like, oh, I really want to get into YouTube. He's like, oh, why don't you do like physics tutorials or something? It's like, oh, but there are so many people, there are already so many physics teachers and such like, but then he made a point of saying that, yeah, but no one teaches it like you do.
Yes.
So for people who are like, oh, well, for yourself, a lot of people are putting out finance content.
Yeah, there's a lot of personal finance content.
Yeah, a lot of personal development content, confidence content for myself. And it's like, don't be discouraged from sharing content because no one is sharing it in exactly the way that you do.
Yeah. No one's lived your exact life. No one's, had your exact background and story.
Yeah, and even then, like, we all have this at school, right? There might be loads of maths teachers, but one of them is your favorite, even though they're teaching the same thing, because they're doing it in different ways. So there's always going to be someone who likes learning from you and likes listening to your content, even if it's, other people are saying similar things.
Yeah, you got your fans out there. You definitely do. You got some people on there that are like very consistently always commenting and liking. So you definitely got some fans.
Yes. A few fans. I'm like, oh, thank you. But it is nice. It is nice it's like having a community that I've never like met in person, but I feel that if we ever did, it would be a nice thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because that's what it is. You're building a community, and you're right. If you're in another country, if you're ever in Texas, you can come visit. Oh, if you're coming here for any reason.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely when I come over there, then you have friends wherever. And that's what's so interesting about LinkedIn. It's kind of this global community you can create, right? And you have access to all these different people. But yeah. I mean, that's what I love about what you're sharing. Cause like you said, as your career path is evolving and you're changing, like your content can change too, and what you want to say and who, you want to talk to. But really, if people are drawn to you, they'll probably stick with you. Right.
Yeah. I love, one of my favorite creators is Ali Abdul. And when he first started,
me too.
Yeah, he was doing tutorials specifically for med students on how to pass the BMATs and different things, and that's obviously not what he's.
No, and now he's like a productivity person. Yeah. Is he really big over there in the UK?
Oh yes, for sure.
Okay, I'm a huge fan. I'm in his part-time YouTuber training. You need to join.
Really? How is it?
That's why I kept telling you, like, Bonnie, this is what I told Bonnie. You should do long form YouTube. You should do like 9 to 10 minute long videos, and they could chop them up and do shorter videos. But I think you'd be so good on camera doing explaining longer concepts. Not necessarily it takes like physics, like 30 minutes, but you could do like 5-10 minute long videos about things, Yeah,
it makes sense. Sometimes I feel like some of my videos.
I'm a huge Ali Abdal fan. I did not know that. I don't want to generalize. I want to be like, oh, everyone in the UK must love or know him. But in that part-time YouTuber academy, it is a lot of Brits in there and people in the UK. Yeah. So there's, who else is in that training? That's real famous. He's a podcaster. Chris Williamson.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
Oh, Modern Wisdom. I love that podcast. Yeah.
Yeah,
You gotta. I'll send you all that later. But okay. Wow, I did not know you're Ali Abdaal fan. Yeah, I was just watching some of his videos earlier today.
okay, I'm really a fan.
Yeah, and his training is great and all that. But yeah, you should do. I think you do so well doing like slightly longer videos and sharing the wisdom and information that you have about speaking, communication, like all different types of topics, right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I've taken more of your time than I should have. Do you have any last things you want to tell anyone, or maybe where they could find you or anything like that?
They can find me on LinkedIn for sure. And I think if there's anything you want to do, then just go do it. I think it took me months before I posted my first LinkedIn video. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, that was really easy to do. Like, I just got my camera and did it, and it was not complicated. And I got some free editing software. So I think don't overcomplicate things. And then in terms of career, don't try to find the perfect thing. The perfect thing might not exist, not straight away anyway. You probably don't even know what that perfect thing is for you yet. And what you want is going to change over time. So if you said you wanted something 10 years ago, don't feel like you have to pursue that, because, people grow and interests change as well.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have multiple careers in a lifetime instead of just having this like one career people settle into and they get like a pension years later. People are going to explore multiple different careers. They're going to live different places, So it's just like life is so multifaceted. Why, put yourself into one thing, have to do it forever. But Thank you so much. This is such a fun conversation.
Yes, as always. Thank you for having me.